Hi there, you're listening to What Are You Going to Do With That? The podcast that introduces you to the young researchers and the guests of the Minerva Center for the Rule of Law under extreme conditions at the University of Haifa. I'm Danni, a PhD student here at the university, and I want to know what road these scholars have taken to get where they are today and how bumpy their ride was. Sitting next to me today is Dr. Yaniv Roznai, who is a senior lecturer at the Harry Radzyner School of Law at the Interdisciplinary Center, or in short, the IDC Herzliya. He focuses on comparative constitutional law, constitutional theory, jurisprudence, and public international law. His work is published in too many journals to list here, but a few examples are the American Journal of Comparative Law and the International and Comparative Law Quarterly. Yaniv's research has been presented at leading American universities, but also at Hong Kong University, the National University of Singapore, Queen Mary, and many more. His book, Unconstitutional Constitutional Amendments, The Limits of Amendment Powers, was published in 2017 and awarded in 2018 with the inaugural International Society for Public Law, the ICANS Book Prize. In that same year, Yaniv was awarded the IDC Excellence in Teaching Award, and in 2019 he was included in the Marcus list of Israel's 40 under 40 in the category of researchers. Wow, Yaniv, quite an impressive track record. If you think I maybe even missed something important, I hope that you can bring it up during our conversation. But first, let me pour my signature drink before we dig in. A little bit for you, and a bit for me. You can have as much as you like. I know you're giving a lecture after this one, so you might not go too fast. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm very happy that you're here today. I've heard a lot about you, and I'd like to get to know the person behind the title a little bit more. So let me ask you some short questions that require really short answers, right? Here we go. First question. What app on your phone do you use most?
Oh, alright. The Gmail one.
Gmail?
Yes.
Mostly work?
Yes. Work.
Alright.
Yeah, constantly. So the Gmail one, Google probably to search for stuff, and the news, maybe Haaretz and Ynet and others. Yes.
Alright, that sounds
nothing too
quite
exciting.
common. No funny things in between?
Well, I guess also Facebook and Twitter throughout the day, although one of the New Year's resolutions that I have is to try and be less on social media so I can have more time on my real work.
On the Google app. The Gmail.
Google Scholar.
Right. Alright, let's go to the second question. What TV show are you currently watching?
TV show. Okay. So, my wife, Avital, and I, we don't really have a lot of time to watch television, but we do have our series that sometimes we record, and then maybe late at night, if we have time, we put on TV. Usually I fell asleep in the middle, but we try. And we've just finished this series. Honestly, I don't even know what's it called. It's about why women kill their husband or something like that.
Is that an American show? Or?
Yes, it is. It's on yes, and it's a wonderful. Actually, it's a great series.
You shouldn't fall asleep halfway through that if you're watching with your wife.
Exactly. Although I'm not the prototype of the husbands there, so I'm on safe ground.
Safe. All right, next one. What was the best birthday gift that you've ever received? Could be a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Or you have to give a diplomatic
no,
answer.
that's actually an easy one. So for my 30th birthday, Avital, again, my wife, gave me a present, which was a surprise. I wasn't sure what is it. She said, let's go to Ramat Gan, to this apartment. And I said, well, what's it going to be in this apartment? Is it going to be a massage or a cooking class? What's it going to be? And we're getting there. The owner opens the door, and then 20 small pug dogs run towards me. So actually we got a pug dog for my 30th birthday. So
you got to choose one.
So I chose, she already chose one for me. And he was waiting, and he was the cutest one. And yeah, so that's my dog. Yeah.
And he's still with you?
He's still with us, yes.
That's very nice. All right. And then, are you a very organized person, or are you one of those naughty professors?
Very good. So I think it depends. When it comes to work-wise, I'm super organized. My office is super organized. My projects are organized. When it comes to my personal life or anything that is other than work, then it's very convenient for me to be very clumsy and not to remember stuff, because I know that Avital remembers everything. So again, I'm
so you're allowed to.
Exactly.
And that way you can balance it out a little bit.
Yes.
All right, last one of the short questions. What is something you think everyone should do at least once in their lives?
Everyone? Or are we talking about
or
scholars?
What could you
or
advise or recommend? It's really up to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that is a tough one. But okay, if I'll try to be serious for a second, there is no doubt, I think, that in retrospect, my decision to go abroad and study abroad to do the LLM was super enriching. It was a wonderful experience. Even if I hadn't continued to do the doctorate, I would recommend anyone who can do it to spend a year abroad. It doesn't have to be to study. To spend a year abroad, to live somewhere else, I think it is a super enriching experience, and I would recommend it to anyone.
So it's really the experience of something different and something new.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Yaniv. I'm very curious also about your work. Can you tell me a bit about why you are with us today? How are you affiliated with the Minerva Center?
All right. Yes. So basically, my doctorate research focused on limits to constitutional change, whether there are certain things that cannot be amended in constitutions, or whether certain constitutional amendments can be either illegitimate or even unconstitutional in a way. And I got to the Minerva Center for a specific study that focused on limits to constitutional change during times of emergency or under extreme conditions. Because in some constitutions, you cannot change the constitution during, for example, wartime or under occupation. So in a way, I managed to combine these two issues, first limits to constitutional change and the extreme conditions, into one research, which is, I'm ashamed to say, is still in the process. I'm still working on it, but hopefully 2020 will be the final year where it will be published.
How long have you been working on this?
Well, I started doing it in 2015, but it's not the only thing I've been doing since.
Of course, as I just listed all of the other things you did in the meantime, I'm not surprised.
And 3 kids, which we haven't mentioned.
Of course, and the wife, but she seems to juggle everything very well in the personal life then. All right, and then from the Minerva Center, how did you get to the IDC Herzliya?
Yeah, so I knew that I want to be in Israel, and I grew up here, and this was the aim, to find an academic position in Israel. And I did the PhD in London at the LSE, and then the postdoc here at the Minerva Center, in addition to a postdoc position at NYU for some time. And then I just applied to the Israeli job market. Now, in Israel, it's very different maybe than in some, European or American universities. There are not so many formalities, in the sense, usually you don't have call for applicants and please submit your nomination till so-and-so date with these following documents, as you can find in many European universities. You need to be proactive. If you want to be in the Israeli job market, you need to be proactive and send emails to, maybe the deans of the different law schools and introduce yourself and say, I'm very interested in finding an academic position. This is me, so-and-so. And then they will reply whether they have an opening or they don't have an opening and how to submit an application. And that's what I did. And if I can be honest, at least for me, this was not such an easy process. If you think about it, I was in the job market for about 3 rounds, let's say 3 years, until I got this position at IDC. And it's quite a frustrating process because you submit your applications to various law schools and sometimes you get letters of rejection, sometimes you don't get response at all, which is the most insulting thing. They don't even respond. I'm saying now it's 2019, I've submitted my applications in 2014. I'm still waiting for some of the letters from certain law schools.
It's very annoying because you put in a lot of effort yourself.
It's fine to get no.
Short email to
exactly,
say,
it's fine
sorry,
to get
but
no.
We're not looking for someone.
It doesn't even have to be a personal phone from the dean. Even an email says, thank you, we've considered your application, but it doesn't work, would be fine. So this is one quite frustrating thing. The second one is that every letter of rejection is like a punch in the stomach. Right? You say, oh, I've been working so hard, trying to do everything that the textbook requires. Why is it not good enough? Everyone asks himself. And so it's quite a frustrating process. Now, I mean, I don't want to sound too negative, but first, the Israeli job market is very, very competitive. It is super competitive. For each position, you have about more or less 40 applicants, many of whom graduated from top law schools, I don't know, in the US or UK, etc. And it's a very competitive market. You need a lot of luck. You need good timing. And you need to be in a good subject also. I mean, I was doing constitutional law, which is quite an overly packed subject. I mean, if someone is doing tax law, if you finish your doctorate in a good university and your subject area is tax law, you have much better chances of finding a position than someone who's doing constitutional law or public international. So this is also something that people who thinking of doing a PhD, I think, need to take into consideration. Now, in the third year, where I finally got the offer, I did a job talk at various places, and then I got the offer from IDC, which for me was the best thing. I mean, this is my dream position. I wouldn't change it for anything.
The IDC is a well-known institution. It has a good name, and also the law faculty.
It has a good reputation, but for me, it was even more than that, because I'm a graduate of IDC. I did my first law degree at IDC. So this is my alma mater. So I knew the place and I knew the professors. So I felt very attached to that place. That's why I was super happy to get the offer. But even there, it wasn't very easy to get it.
All right, let's take a short step back. What made you go on for those 3 years to keep looking for that job that you wanted?
So that's, I think, a great question, because I have many friends who simply either didn't have the stamina or said it's not worth it. And after the first or second attempt, said I will just go and look for something else, either a think tank or go to work in a law firm or go to work with the government, etc. I think that I had first a very strong will. I knew that this is what I want to do. I want to be in academia. I thought that it suits me. I didn't see myself doing anything else. And it was such a strong will that Avital and I said to ourselves that if this doesn't work out in Israel, then I would just look abroad. And I wouldn't say funny enough, but perhaps even frustratingly enough, it would have been easier for me to get a position elsewhere than in Israel.
Easier, why?
Because there are more positions, there are more openings in very good places in UK, in Hong Kong, in other law schools, which are excellent. So I think that if Israel didn't work out, unfortunately, I would probably consider leaving, maybe not permanently, but leaving the country abroad for an academic position.
All right. Well, we're very happy that you have a position here in Israel with us and that you get to visit us so easily. All right. So we've talked about a few of your struggles, which most recently was finding the job. Was there anything else that you've encountered? You said as a tip for others, it's important to have the abroad experience. You've studied in various places. You said in Israel, in the US, and also in the UK? Only in the US? No,
so I did my doctorate at the UK, and then I was a visiting researcher in Princeton and did my postdoc at NYU. So I tried to combine UK and US, yeah.
All right. But was it difficult for you to change universities, to get used to different cultures in different countries, or maybe to change slightly your topic or what you're focusing on?
So I don't think it was too difficult professionally wise. I mean, I did the same research, same topics, etc. It was very interesting to meet different people, different scholars with different approaches, that yes, but it was mostly difficult personally wise, because we sacrificed a lot for me to do all these kind of trips. So Avital and I lived in London for a while, and when I flew to do a semester in Princeton, we did this long distance relationship first semester. And again, when I did my postdoc at NYU, we did again a long distance relationship, and this time with kids. First semester.
Been difficult, then.
It was super difficult. It was probably much more difficult for Avital than for me. But it was a big sacrifice, and not everyone can do it.
All right, but now you would say it was worth it?
Yes, of course. I'm very happy. I don't regret anything that I did. But I think that people need to understand if they want to tick all the boxes, then there's a lot to sacrifice, no doubt. I think if I'm thinking of maybe tips for future scholars, one thing that I think, or I guess, made a big difference for me was the book contract. So, as you mentioned, my book was published in 2017, and I think when you're in the job market and you don't need to have the actual book, but if you have a book contract with a well-known or prestigious publisher like OUP, CUP, etc., I think this gives you a lot of extra points that others don't have, because now the bar is very high. In the past, if you had one publication, that was something very nice. Nowadays, if I look at the CV of those who are in the academic job market, it's simply crazy. They have 5, 6, 8 publications in really top law journals, and then you say, okay, what else do you need? So I think here a book, or at least a book contract, can give you some extra points in this very high competitive market.
All right, so you've talked about your book contracts, and you've also published quite a lot in different journals, as I've mentioned. So can you tell us a little bit about how you can publish something in a nice journal as a tip for our listeners?
So thank you for this question. I think that I, as a scholar, I did various mistakes that in retrospect, I think that maybe were mistakes. I don't know. I published quite a lot. And I published stuff since I was a LLB student and a master student, and I didn't really care about the placement. I mean, I submitted, for example, my LLM thesis, which was in the topic of armed conflict. I submitted it to this competition, and then it was in California, and it was it won the first place, and then it told me, oh, so we're going to publish it in the California Journal of International, which I was very happy as an LLM student. It's, wow, you're really going to publish my paper? Wow, that's awesome. In retrospect, I realized that this is the California Bar Journal, and it's not actually ranked, and academically it doesn't count. And I also published various things in Israeli law journals that are not highly ranked. And nowadays, when some scholars look at my CV, or when they talk to me and say, oh, why did you publish this and this article in that or that journal? Now, to be honest, at that time, I didn't really care. I was very happy to put my things and my thoughts out there.
And to have something on your resume already.
Exactly, to have something on the resume, and you publish things for various reasons. I didn't think about it academically wise. And not to mention, I've never bothered to check the ranking of different journals, etc. And I think that in retrospect, my suggestion to young scholars would be to prioritize quality over quantity. So I think it's better to have 2 or 3 articles in the best journals you can have than have 20 articles in very low-ranked journals. And people don't think about it. You want to put your things out there. So I think this may be one thing that if I had thought about it earlier, I might have done differently. Because from what I hear from other colleagues, sometimes it's better not to publish than publish a piece in a bad, even if you think it's a good piece, to publish it in a bad law journal. And I'm quite happy with even the things that I published in low-ranked journals. I really liked it. I appreciate if I can talk about my own stuff. I really liked those pieces. I don't regret writing them. But I think that at least when it comes to academic reputation, now in retrospect, maybe it is better to wait and try to put it in a good placement. And if you can't publish it in a good place, then maybe it's better not to publish it at all. It's sad, I think, but if you think strategically, maybe that's the wiser thing to do.
Alright, so you've already mentioned that in this new year, you're thinking of using less social media, right? But why is that? What is your experience with it? And have you used social media academically or only personally?
So that's a wonderful question. So first, yes, being a comparative constitutional scholar, I actually use social media quite a lot as a platform for professional purposes. So for example, I can find or just post call for papers for different interesting symposia or conferences. And also if I have a question or a specific question about jurisdictions which I'm not familiar with, then I can ask my friends. I have good professional scholars, friends from different places in the world, and I can ask them for questions, etc. So I actually I use social media quite a lot. I was having my thoughts whether to continue to be so active on social media simply because I find it that I put a lot of time and energy in discussing, again, constitutional questions, but that are in the public or everyday agenda. First, as I said, because it's time consuming, and I always question myself whether it's not better to use this time to do my real academic work instead. There are, of course, a lot of benefits. I am trying not to stay at the high level of abstraction of here's high theory, but to make my ideas and research accessible to other people, because I think we have real life implications to what we do and what we write. So I think that social media and writing op-eds in newspapers, etc., is one way to channel our research from simply being in the ivory tower and make it accessible to laymen and other people, and maybe even to influence policymakers, etc. But I think the crucial point here is balance, to have a good balance. I don't think you want to be too much just on the media and to go on TV and radio all the time, but you also need to have your voice heard, not to be only in the academic sphere of academic journals, etc. So I think there should be a nice balance between the two. There is one thing that I would recommend for young scholars. There is what we call professional blogs, and I think that if there are high profile and with high quality blogs, for example, EGIL for international law or iConnect for public and constitutional law, I think if you're a young scholar and you can write a very nice, polished and novel post regarding your own study, your own research, I think that posting such a blog post could be actually a very good way to have your name out there so people would be familiar with you, with what you're working on. I found that blog posts are read by many more people than anyone would ever read your article in a very distinguished journal. So I would certainly recommend that. But again, I think this would have to be limited to very good and professional blogs. And I think it's better than having your own personal blog where you can just write about anything, but then you don't really sit and consider things thoroughly before you put them out there in the air. So I would certainly recommend using such professional blogs.
Right. Well, you've just mentioned that you've been abroad also by yourself, and that at the time you already had your wife and even children. And we hear this a lot, that scholars, PhD students, postdocs, young researchers are often very lonely, and that depression is a very common thing amongst these scholars. So if you think back about it, what helped you through that time? Was there any family, friends, colleagues, maybe supervisors that helped you go through that time?
Yeah, I think that's quite a well-known phenomena. At least for me, it didn't really bother me personally. I mean, I was very happy to be alone with my books and articles and to sit for 10, 12, 14 hours a day, just me and my books and cases. But there is something frustrating where you finally find the good quotation that you were looking for. Or, I found this amazing judgment from the Czech Republic, but then you have no one to share it with because no one, apart from you, actually cares about this project or unconstitutional amendments. So who cares about that? So I understand why people feel that this is quite a lonely process. I think that here, to have good colleagues, I mean, we at the LSE, we were a very small group of PhD students. We were 5 and quite a very close group. So we had our weekly meetings and we used to go out quite a lot. And I think this was quite meaningful for me to know that I'm not alone in my process. But also, you mentioned supervisors. I think the idea of supervisory, it's a super important aspect of this process. I was very lucky to have 2 wonderful supervisors, Martin Locklin and Thomas Poole from the LSE, and they were extremely caring and supportive in many ways, more ways than I can even express. They were always there for me for anything I needed, whether it was personal or professional, and there is no doubt that this is a very central aspect of being a doctoral student.
All right, it's good to hear that you weren't completely alone then. And sometimes it's also really nice to be.
But I think if I can just follow up this, I think if you're a PhD student and you have problems with your supervisor, I think it's crucial to pause and question that relationship. Sometimes it's better to cut that relationship at an earlier stage and try to change a supervisor, or think maybe there is a need to add another supervisor rather than sticking with a problematic one for a long time, and then you realize after 4 or 5 years that something is wrong, and then it may be too late. So I think both the supervisor and the student, the doctorate student, need all the time to reflect upon the relationship.
Did you have only good supervisors?
Yes.
I guess you don't
I'm
have
sorry.
another answer
Yes,
to
I'm sorry. I had only good supervisors.
That's very good. All right, so let's move on to the other side of the coin. You already said that you had the book published, and that helped you very much to get the job that you really wanted in Israel. But what do you consider your biggest achievements?
So I'll tell you a story here. I did, as I mentioned, my topic was limits to constitutional change, and I remember I started my PhD in 2010, and in 2012 I participated in this doctorate conference at Yale, which is a wonderful conference, and I recommend any PhD student to apply and attend. And you meet a lot of other PhD students from all around the world, and I was in this panel with another friend who did his PhD at Yale, with Bruce Ackerman, who's the most famous constitutional law professor in the world, and the topic was exactly the same topic as my topic. So if you're a PhD student and you know that there's another PhD student who writes on the exact same thing, you panic. Of course, after talking to him, and we're good friends, I realized that we have different studies in a way, or we're not focusing on similar topics or methods, so it was fine. But at first I panicked. And since I was already 2 years into the PhD and I already collected a lot of materials, I read a lot and I've written many things, I've decided that I think it's time to start and put things out there to the broader world, to know that, okay, here I am, this is what I'm working on. And I've decided to publish an article on unconstitutional amendments, but an article that would be more descriptive than revealing parts of the theory that I would then develop in the doctorate. And this was a comparative article, and I then consulted a professor, a famous professor for comparative law, where shall I send it? And she said, this was Kim Lane Shepley, she said, the best journal in the world for comparative stuff is the American Journal of Comparative Law. But know this, they reject over 91 or 92% of the things that are submitted to them. And well, I was still a very young scholar, and I said, shall I do it? Shall I? No. And I thought, okay, what do I have to lose? I mean, I'll send it there. The worst case scenario is that it wouldn't get accepted, and then I can try somewhere else. I submitted my paper. This was a 60-page long article. And then after 3 months or so, I went to peer review. I get this email from the editor. Okay, it passed the peer review. You're accepted. We just want you to have some minor revisions in the conclusion, and then that's it. So I couldn't believe it at the time. I was super happy. And I think that the lesson is, first you need to be confident with what you do. And you need to aim high. You need to aim as higher as you can. And, worst case, you can start going down the ladder. But don't be afraid to aim high. And so I think, at least at the time, this was my biggest achievement as a doctorate student.
All right. Congratulations. I'll drink to that. Sounds very good. Cheers. So I think we can wrap it up, because you've already given us quite a lot of tips too. So the last thing what I want to know is, what's your next project?
Oh, that's great. So one project that I've just actually finished is another book with a wonderful professor from University of Texas, Gary Jacobson, and we finished a book on constitutional revolution, and this is forthcoming in a few months with Yale University Press, and I'm very happy and excited about this project because Professor Jacobson was a huge source of inspiration for me during my own writings. And when he approached me about this project, I was very honored and excited, and I was super happy about this project. It also took us about 3 years, even more than 3 years, to finish this book. But I think this book sits very well with my earlier book, so I'm building here something that is nice and current that I'm very happy with. So this is one thing, and now I've started another book project that I call We the Limited People. And the idea is to see whether there are any boundaries to constitution making, to the people's constituent power in a way, which is related but slightly different from my earlier work. So I'm very excited to work on this. I don't know when it will be finished, but this is what I'm working on now.
Something new and exciting.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, to wrap up, I'd like to ask you another set of short questions. Are you ready?
All right, let's do it.
What was the most important conference you've been to?
So I attended the American Society of Comparative Law annual work in progress workshop, which was by far the best academic workshop I've ever attended. It's not easy to get accepted. They accept a very limited number of papers every year, but then they put a lot of effort on every paper. So you get 2 highly distinguished professors commenting on your paper, and you have 1 hour or an hour and a half of roundtable of all the participants in the workshop just talking on your own paper, and you do not participate. You do not say anything until the end. In the end, you have 10 minutes or 15 minutes out of this hour and a half that you can respond, ask questions, but the idea is to have maximum feedback and minimum pressure. You can just say, thank you very much, everyone. I'm not going to answer anything, and it's fine. Or you can just ask questions. So for me, this was the best conference I've ever attended.
So it might be hard to get in, but we're going to apply anyway because
Exactly.
we're aiming high. All right. Which scholarship was hardest to get?
The LSE doctorate scholarship was difficult, although I'm not very informed because I'm not sure about the process. So I can't really give an informed answer about that. But I think probably the one I'm familiar with was the Modern Law Review Scholarship, which is a scholarship that, I don't know, maybe around 10 students from all the UK get, but you need to pass various levels. So first you need to have, there's an internal competition, and you need the dean of your own law school to recommend you, and usually they recommend 1 or 2 people. And then there's a national-wide competition within the UK. So I think that's very highly competitive. It was very difficult to get it, but it was very rewarding in a way.
All right. And what do you consider to be your best find?
My best?
Find. Or anything new that you've discovered in your research or the conclusion of your book?
Okay. So I think the thing I like most about my project, when you talk about limits to constitutional change, and if you read papers or if you go to a conference about this topic, usually you have the usual suspects. So when they talk about eternity clauses in constitutions, they give Germany and the German Grundgesetz, the basic law, with its eternity clause. Or if they talk about implicit limits to constitutional change, usually they give India as the example. And one of the things that I'm quite happy that I found was that the idea of limits to constitutional change is not that unique or extreme. Actually, it exists in a very long list of constitutions, and maybe 40% of all constitutions include explicit eternity clauses. And there are many other courts that have decided that there are implicit limits to constitutional change, not only in India, but in many other jurisdictions such as, Colombia and Taiwan and Belize and Bangladesh and other places. So I think this is one of the things I was very happy to find.
Very interesting. And hopefully you'll find some more in the next book. So who has impressed you most with what they've accomplished?
You mean in general?
Yes, maybe an idol or someone you've always looked up to.
So I think I can easily think of 2 names, 2 or even 3. So one person that I've was very intrigued by his findings is Tom Ginsberg, Professor Tom Ginsberg from Chicago, who does many large numbers researchers on constitutions, and he found super interesting things that you've never imagined. So, for example, when I read his book, co-authored book on the endurance of national constitutions, we always think of constitutions as something that lasts for many years, something almost permanent. And then in the book, they show that actually half of world constitutions die when they're 19.
Okay.
So many countries simply replace their constitutions, totally replace their constitution. I'm not talking about amendments, every 19 years. And that was quite astonishing for me to read. Other scholars that I highly admire are, again, Gary Jacobson, whom I was working on, and Kim Lane-Shepley, who do comparative constitutional law, but very deep and thorough analysis of jurisdictions. So they go deep to find trends, but they also understand the context, the political context, and the social and cultural context, which I admire a lot. And my own PhD supervisor, Martin Laughlin, who does a lot of history of ideas work. So in a sense, when he was writing about the concept of constituent power, he wasn't just writing about it, philosophically, but really tracing the historical roots of this concept, which is something that I relate to very much.
All right. And then the last one. How do you relax after a hard day of work?
I don't see any contradiction between scholarly work and relaxation. My own relaxation is if I sit and write and read, I do it for pleasure. So even if I don't tell it to IDC people, but even if I hadn't got any money for what I do, I would still probably do the same thing. Or if, as I put it differently, if I would now win, the lottery with, 10 million shekels or dollars, never mind, I would probably still have the same daily schedule as I do now. So I probably wouldn't change anything.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Yaniv, and also to the audience for listening. Keep coming back to the link where you found this podcast for more episodes will follow soon. I'll pour you another sip and then you can tell me more about the next book because it sounded very interesting. Would you like some more?
No, I'm good.
I'll have a little bit
I have
more.
a presentation later.
That's right. What are you going to talk about?
I'm going to talk about who will save the redheads towards a bully theory of judicial review and the protection of democracy.
All right. And how much time do you have to talk about that?
I think 30 minutes, and then we'll have another discussion for around an hour, I guess. That's more or less.
So what is the 1 minute summary?
Okay. The 1 minute summary is this. Courts have an important role in protecting democracy. The problem is that nowadays courts are under extreme political pressure. And what should courts do? That's a big question. When there's a political pressure and there's risk of political backlash, should courts go into the bunker, be strategic and say, okay, I will just lower my head for now and maybe the storm will pass? Or do they need to confront the political branches? And what I try to say is that we need to think about that as if we're facing a bully. If you give, in the first day in school, if you give the bully your wallet, the bullying doesn't end there. And the bully wants more and more, and we just simply won't stop. Likewise, in context of democratic erosion, if courts go down the bunker, this usually didn't help to protect democracy. But likewise, if you confront the bully and punch him between his eyes, this usually is not such a good solution because the bully is usually stronger and bigger. So what you need to do, I think, is some kind of a middle ground, which I call business as usual. You don't need to bend down before the bully, but you also don't need to be overly aggressive and now start to attack. You need to stand firm, stand for yourself. But an important aspect in bullying theory is third parties. Who's around? If you have people in the playground with you to help you face the bully, that's important. So likewise in democracy, courts on their own cannot protect democracy. They need civil society, they need the political branches, and they need the people, without which courts alone cannot save democracy.
Very interesting. I'm very curious to the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much.